The life and sad ending of Jerry Garcia. Jerome John Garcia was born on August 1, 1942, in San Francisco, California, the second son of José Ramon Garcia and Ruth Marie Garcia. His father was a Spanish immigrant who had been a clarinetist, saxophonist and bandleader until a dispute with the Musicians' Union led him to give up music as a profession and buy a tavern. His mother had been a nurse before her marriage. Garcia displayed an early interest in music and took piano lessons as a child. He suffered 2 early traumas. At the age of 4, he lost the top half of the middle finger of his right hand in a wood chopping accident. The following year, his father accidentally drowned while fishing. His mother took over management of the tavern, and he was sent to live with his grandparents for the next 5 years, moving back in with his mother after she remarried in 1953. The family lived in various locations in San Francisco and its suburbs, and Garcia attended several different schools where he was an indifferent student, forced to repeat 8th grade. He showed greater interest in art, attending the California School of Fine Arts during the summer of 1957, and for his 15th birthday that year, his mother gave him a guitar. Soon, he was playing in bands in high school. He continued to be uninterested in studying, however, and in January 1960, at the age of 17, he dropped out. In April 1960, he enlisted in the Army, but he proved unsuited to Army life and was dishonorably discharged in December 1960. Now 18 years old, Garcia moved to Palo Alto, California, where he lived informally over the next several years, playing in clubs and bookstores near the campus of Stanford University and encountering many of the people he would work with for the rest of his career. Among them was the aspiring poet Robert Hunter, who would become his lyric partner, but who now played bass with him in a duo, Bob and Jerry, and later in other groups. The early 60s was the period of a folk music revival, and Garcia became an avid student of folk, old-time country, and bluegrass music, playing both the acoustic guitar and banjo in ad hoc groups with names like the Sleepy Hollow Hog Stompers, the Wildwood Boys and the Hart Valley Drifters over the next 2 years. In the winter of 1962 to 1963, he met Sarah Lee Rupenthal, an undergraduate student at Stanford, and they formed a duo called Jerry and Sarah. They married on April 25, 1963, and their daughter Heather Garcia, who later became a classical violinist, was born on December 8, 1963. With his marriage, Garcia settled down somewhat, taking a job teaching in a music store. During 1964, he began playing in a jug band, Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions, that also featured guitarist-singer Bob Weir and singer-harmonica player, keyboardist Ron McKernan. At the turn of 1965, the group took up electric instruments and became a rock and roll band, adding drummer Bill Kreutzmann and renaming themselves the Warlocks. Phil Lesh, another friend of Garcia's, joined on bass by June 1965, and in December the quintet first performed under its new name, The Grateful Dead. Their first single, comprising the traditional songs Stealin' and Don't Ease Me In, was released by Scorpio Records in June 1966, and Garcia was the lead vocalist on both tracks. That fall, he took a step toward greater recognition outside the band by serving as the producer of fellow San Francisco rock band Jefferson Airplane's second album, Surrealistic Pillow. In addition to helping with arrangements and playing guitar on the LP, he also suggested its title, but he was barred contractually from being named the album's producer, instead of being listed as musical and spiritual advisor. Meanwhile, the Grateful Dead signed to Warner Brothers. Records for the release of their first album, The Grateful Dead, in March 1967. Featuring the Garcia-written song Cream Puff War, the LP peaked in the top 100. By this time, Garcia was separated from his wife, from whom he was later divorced, and living with Carolyn Adams, the woman with whom he had the longest relationship in his complicated romantic life. The couple had two daughters, Annabelle, born in 1970, and Teresa, born in September 1974. Garcia's and the Grateful Dead's interest in country rock was explored on the band's fifth album, Working Man's Dead, released in May 1970, and Garcia composed or co-composed 7 of its 8 songs, including Uncle John's Band, which became the Grateful Dead's first chart single. American Beauty, their sixth album, released that November, continued in this style, and Garcia was involved in the writing of 7 of its 10 songs, among them Friend of the Devil, later covered by Counting Crows, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and Chris Smither, among others, and Ripple, later covered by such varied artists as Rick Danko, Perry Farrell, Jimmy Dale Gilmore, and Chris Hillman. The Grateful Dead reverted to a more eclectic style after these 2 popular albums, but the self-titled debut album by the New Riders of the Purple Sage, released by Columbia Records in the summer of 1971, continued in the country rock sound. Garcia amicably exited the New Riders that fall, but played on their next album, Powerglide, and later produced their 1974 live album, Home on the Road. Also, something of a follow-up to Working Man's Dead and American Beauty was the first half of Garcia's debut solo album for Warner Brothers. Records, Garcia, released in January 1972. The LP, featuring the chart single Sugary, reached the top 40. Shortly afterward, Fantasy Records released Heavy Turbulence, an album credited to keyboardist Merle Saunders, but actually featuring Garcia's club band, which now was co-led by Saunders, who had replaced Wales. The band also would feature on the Saunders album Fire Up and on the double LP Live at Keystone, recorded in July 1973 and released in the spring of 1974. Meanwhile, the Grateful Dead's seventh album, a live double LP titled Grateful Dead, had appeared in September 1971, featuring 2 new Garcia Hunter songs, Bertha and Wharf Rat. Their eighth, a triple LP called Europe 72, released in November 1972, introduced such Garcia Hunter compositions as He's Gone, Brown-Eyed Woman, and Tennessee Jed. In June 1974, Round Records released Garcia's second solo album, which, like his first, was called Garcia. To avoid confusion, fans began calling it Compliments of Garcia because of the legend Compliments of that appeared on a sticker on promotional copies sent to radio stations, and it later was officially retitled Compliments. The album featured no new compositions by Garcia and was more in the mode of his club band, with numerous cover songs. Nevertheless, it reached the top 50. Within weeks, Grateful Dead Records released a new Grateful Dead studio album, Grateful Dead from the Mars Hotel, which featured 5 new Garcia Hunter songs among its 8 tracks. In October 1974, the Grateful Dead played a series of shows at the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco that was filmed and recorded, preparatory to taking a hiatus from concert work. That had no effect on Garcia's other live work, however. His band with Saunders had acquired a name, the Legion of Mary, and it continued to perform steadily into the summer of 1975 when it broke up. Also in 1975, Garcia broke up with his common-law wife, Carolyn Adams, and began a relationship with aspiring filmmaker Deborah Coons. But when that relationship ended in 1977, he returned to Adams. The 1980s was a very difficult period for Garcia. He had become addicted to drugs because of which his health declined considerably. This also impacted his musical career negatively and thus he was not much productive during this decade. He returned to his past glory in the 1990s when he teamed up with the bluegrass-newgrass mandolinist and composer David Grisman to release the albums Garcia, Grisman, and Not for Kids Only. On August 8, he entered another rehab facility in Forest Knolls, California. In the early hours of August 9, 1995, he died there in his sleep of a heart attack at the age of 53.